Our next writer is Bingle. This is a man so committed to the environment, he arranged for himself to be born on Earth Day, 16 years before it was even invented. He wrote the novel Greensward, a tale of extreme global warming, the world's only and thus best-selling, darkly comedic eco-thriller about global warming. In addition, he's penned several other thrillers, Forced Conversion, Net Impact, Frame Shop, all of which are available on the table over there, as well as about 50 published pieces of short fiction. Tonight he's going to read Rejecting the Anthropocene, which was first published in, Tales of an Altered Past Powered by Romance, Horror, and Steam, a collection of his steampunk stories. Steampunk is a branch of science fiction set primarily in the 19th and early 20th century, which imagines present-day technology, and instead of being powered by electricity, it's all powered by steam. Think Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, Wild Wild West. Tonight's story is set in Great Britain, so Don's going to be using a bunch of English accents, which should prove to be very interesting. He does guarantee, however, that his work will be better than Keanu Reeves' English accents in Dracula. We'll see. Don, please come on up.
I approach a lot of topics from a darkly humorous place. That means that sometimes different people get different messages from what I write, which is fine. And sometimes the message is just that things are complicated. This is Rejecting the Anthropocene. Here now, Governor, do not take the podium. It's right dangerous now, isn't it? I cannot guarantee your safety if you're determined to make yourself a target. The burly constable not so subtly blocked the path to the stage as he made his plea. It would be frightful indeed, joined in Nicholas Danbury, chair of the program committee, if our scholarly proceedings were to be marred by any commotion, Thaddeus. Consider the standing and reputation of our society should violence or even a shouting match erupt during the course of your presentation. Thaddeus Farrington Cadwalder did his best to tamp down his temper, as well as his blood pressure, but without avail. This is the Royal Society, Nicholas. It is the bastion of educated men of reason. We speak the truth about all matters, mathematical, philosophical, historical, and scientifical. His voice quavered, and he could feel his face flushing and the pressure building behind his eyes as he continued. To suggest that the facts be hidden because of the murmurings of a mad mundane is unmitigated treason and blasphemy to the logical mind. I shall go on, and you shall not stop me. He shifted his gaze from his weak-willed companion to the grim-faced constable. Nor you, sir. Please step to the side. The constable did not shift position, but instead softened his facial features and gave a forced, tight smile before speaking in a smooth, quiet voice he obviously had been trained to use when attempting to calm hysterical women and cornered miscreants. Now there, sir, no need to rush off right away before we discuss this. All calm and clear now. After all, like I done said already, headquarters has a man in custody what says he was part of a crew aiming to kill you tonight. Thaddeus found the report of doubtful credulity and the officer's demeanor of certain condescension, but had no desire to commence a shoving match with a representative of the law. Instead, he matched the man's grimace lip for tight lip and gave him a curt nod, indicating his assent to a reasoned discussion. The officer relaxed visibly and nodded his head in a knowing manner. It's another dissertation on that there monkey theory, isn't it? Thaddeus rolled his eyes. The Society is already well acquainted with the theories of both Darwin and Wallace, though they no doubt remain of interest to the members of the Society, as well as to the deans of the church and the rabble-rousing proletariat. Such biological studies are not the area of my interest or expertise, and thus those inflamed by such discussions would have no complaint against my theories. The constable sucked on a tooth for a moment, then scratched at the edge of his mustache. Well, somebody's incensed about your theories, whatever they are. It's not like you are just going to go out there and make pleasant conversation about the weather. Thaddeus dropped his chin and closed his eyes and began to mentally recite the digits of pi to 128 decimal places before continuing in the calm, smooth voice he himself reserved for small children and men of breathtaking ignorance. That's just it, Sergeant. I was indeed verily going to go out on stage to stand at the podium and talk about the weather. The officer jerked back, as if slapped across the face. What's this then? Nicholas jumped into the discussion, perhaps concerned that the police might think Thaddeus was merely being patronizing. Sir Farrington Cadwalader speaks the truth, officer. His dissertation is entitled The Impact of High Volumeric Coal Combustion Occasioned by the Industrial Revolution on Climatological Factors in Preventing Impending Glaciation and Commencing the Anthropocene Era. The officer merely turned his mustachioed face toward Nicholas, giving the program chair a blank expression that amply communicated the constable's dumbfoundedness, as if confused whether the members of the society were making sport of him. And what's all that mumbledy-jumbledy mean, then? Thaddeus sighed. Let me give you a précis, if you will. A what? Thaddeus forced his tight smile even broader. A brief summary, suitable for the working man. The constable frowned. I'm listening. Simply put, began Thaddeus, quickly shifting into professorial mode and tone, the Earth's climate warms and cools over various periods based upon a variety of factors. For our purposes here, there is no reason to explain these factors in detail, except to say that in the last several centuries, these natural conditions have suggested the Earth was moving toward a period of extreme cooling and accelerating glaciation, the formation and expansion of the snowfields and glacial rivers of ice which predominate in the northern climes of, say, Norway. In short, that another ice age was upon us. It was? Murmured the police officer. Very much so, replied Thaddeus, warming to his cooling subject. Though you are far, far too young, fine man, to recall personally, perhaps you have heard your elders talk about the summer of 1816, or perhaps more accurately, the year without a summer. Crop failures due to late frosts, persistent cold fogs, and diminished sunshine led to famine and riots, not just here, but on the continent and in the Americas and China. This was more than just a cool summer. It was a sustained global phenomenon from 1816 through the dark, frigid winter of 1817 and on into 1818. In eastern Switzerland, a burgeoning ice dam expanded and did not collapse until almost 2 years later, inundating the valleys below with icy cold water. My great-grandpa did tell me tales once of a big fair held every year in London on the ice of the Thames, back when he was a lad. But I paid him no mind with such silly talk. Thaddeus nodded. He told you true, officer. The Frost Fair was held on the solid ice of the Thames from 1607 through the early 1800s. This period of increasing cold can be traced back almost 500 years. In 1658, Copenhagen was attacked by a Swedish army arriving on foot across the frozen Baltic Sea. In 1780, denizens of New York could stroll to Staten Island across the frozen New York harbor. So we're all going to die? Asked the constable. You think that's why people are upset? Everyone dies, interjected Nicholas, always the master of the tautological, but Thaddeus waved him off. If things had continued along, we might have had ice a mile thick upon London itself. But instead, something wonderful happened. Divine providence? Perhaps, Thaddeus temporized, but if so, evidenced by the arrival and rapid dissemination of the industrial age, the expansion of a great variety of factories, machines, inventions, and appliances powered by steam. He gave the constable his best professorial stare. And what do all these steam-powered devices have in common, officer? The man scrunched up his forehead and wiggled his nose in perplexity. They're bloody noisy. Thaddeus felt his enthusiasm wane. Well, yes, but I was thinking that the steam is all, or nearly all, generated by coal-fired generators. The rapid geometric rise in the combustion of coal to power mechanisms creates vast amounts of insidious carbon dioxide, an odorless, colorless gas that leads to atmospheric warming. If the expansion of the steam age had been slow and gradual, such impact on the atmosphere may have taken several hundred years before it caused any discernible effect on the observable climate. But the veritable explosion of steam-powered devices in the last century has caused a seismic shift, staving off the incipient ice age and saving humanity from the scourge of freezing as glaciers crept across the landscape. The beneficial impact is so marked, and the sooty residue of burning coal so visually and chemically noticeable, that the sediment of our land and our oceans will evidence our anthropomorphic impact upon the earth. Hence, my paper postulates that the advent of steam power should be marked as the beginning of the Anthropocene age, geologically speaking. The constable nodded along as if following Thaddeus's explanation until the very end, when he screwed up his face in apparent confusion or consternation. So these machines, they saved us all, you're saying. Why'd anyone be opposed to that? Thaddeus had no response. But before he could admit his own confusion, Reginald Tremont, sergeant at arms and thus head of security for the Royal Society, rushed toward the trio, brandishing a sheaf of papers. I think I can answer that question, he blustered. You can, gasped Nicholas. Good show, replied Thaddeus. Please tell us all who could be dismayed to the point of threatened violence over the deliverance of mankind from certain doom. They call themselves the punks, responded Reginald. Punks, like street punks? Queried Nicholas. No, as in P-U-N-C. It's an acronym for People United for Natural Conditions. Nicholas's eyes widened. I've heard of them. Luddites, aren't they? They run about destroying machinery, puncturing steam boilers, tossing sand into the gears of mechanisms and some such. Ignorant peasants, if you ask me. Precisely, answered Reginald. They're bloody steamed about steam, if you'll pardon the pun. I shall do no such thing, responded Thaddeus dryly. Reginald gave him a glance. Well, these punks are bloody riled up. Written a manifesto and everything, saying how if God had intended man to burn rocks, he'd have shovel for hands and be able to spit fire. What? Asked the constable. You mean they don't believe in fire? What happens when it gets cold? Reginald slapped the sheaf of papers in his left hand with his right. According to this, they just take it. He scanned down the first page. Let me quote, if an ice age comes, I will do my duty to God and freeze to death in the dark. Thaddeus shuddered. What about food? Certainly they make fires to cook their meat. Reginald shook his head. Not even that. Oh, they eat raw meat or fish from time to time, from what I understand. At least some of them. But most of them eschew food of any kind that requires cooking. Just vegetables and mushrooms, mostly. Thaddeus threw up his hands in despair. This is vexing to the point of ridiculosity. I refuse to let a coterie of ignorant vegetabilists and fundamentalists dictate the progress of scientifical inquiry. He began to push past the constable toward the stage, but turned back when he realized that Nicholas had grabbed hold of his coattail. Your bravery will have to hold at least a few moments, explained Nicholas. Given our discussions, I arranged for the speaker scheduled after you to move into your position, lest the assemblage grow restless over any delay while we conversed. He's just beginning now. Thaddeus was about to acknowledge the logic of Nicholas's programming decision when there was a commotion at the podium. A bevy of lower-class ruffians had leapt upon the stage and were stabbing a short, vaguely professorial-looking man repeatedly. Reginald pressed past both Thaddeus and the constable with amazing alacrity at the first sign of disturbance to go to the victim's rescue. The constable followed in close order. And while they and the many members of the Royal Society who had swarmed up from their seats valiantly attempted to pull the attackers off the guest lecturer, a prodigious pool of crimson expanding on the stage floor was incontrovertible evidence that their efforts were in vain. The steamed punks had assassinated the speaker, the man they thought to be Thaddeus Farrington Cadwalder, before he had uttered a single word. And for what? For espousing that perhaps the industrial age had prevented the earth from cooling unacceptably? He would never understand radicals. Thaddeus turned away from the scene toward Nicholas Danbury, the man whose quite reasonable and understandable programming decision had just cost an innocent man his life. Nicholas was pale, his eyes wide. The programming's entire body trembled in shock. Thaddeus spoke to him in a quiet, calm voice. What was his topic? Nicholas's face jerked toward him as if coming out of a trance, his face blank. Thaddeus repeated himself. The man on stage, what was his topic? Nicholas reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and produced the day's program, opening it with shaking hands. Finding the entry, Nicholas responded in a hoarse whisper. The utilization of purified, emitting, decaying minerals to provide virtually unlimited power for steam production without gaseous byproducts or environmental contaminants. Unlimited clean energy? Thaddeus started at the implications for mankind. He'd heard of emitting decaying minerals, of course. Some called them radioactive, but that garish and imprecise moniker would never adhere, not with true scientists. But if emitting decaying minerals could truly be used to generate vast amounts of heat for producing steam, such power plants would, implemented wisely, revolutionize the world. Cheap, unlimited power was everyone's dream come true. Remarkable. He laid his own hands atop Nicholas's hands, both to quell their shaking and to comfort the man, before asking his next question. Well, he was so short, I didn't get a good look at him as... He stopped for a moment and started anew. I didn't see the speaker clearly. Was he anyone local? Someone I know? Nicholas looked back down at the program. A young professor from Switzerland, by way of Wittenberg, named Albert Einstein. Never heard of him, replied Thaddeus with a shake of his head. But if his paper was any good, I'm sure I would have eventually. Sounds like a right clever fellow. I lost, no doubt. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Nice job on the accents. Be back with more. Thanks.